Okay, so for my school assignment, I had 3 passages I had to write 3 sermons on. They were all from Mark. I thought that this would be the most applicable to you guys. So it's going to be a sermon on faithfulness. Noel, if you can hit the next slide. I've told you a lot about my little military career, how long I served for a while. And definitely when you're in the service, you have a lot of moments where you need to really hone in that faith. Before we even get to that part, which was very early on, it was in boot camp. But I want to kind of show you what I looked like. This was me maybe month 2 into boot camp. I went in weighing 180 pounds. I'm sorry, 170. By the time I left, I weighed 138. So I lost like 32 pounds. Next slide. This was me when I graduated. As you can see, I'm a lot slimmer. I have a very chiseled jaw, and I was very young. This was me. This is how skinny I was. I couldn't even fit into my dress blues. They were kind of like big on me. And then that was my girlfriend at the time. That's my wife now. She went to my graduation. Go ahead, next slide. So on my right, this is me during MOS school. I'm still very skinny, very short hair. Still baby-faced, Mr. Sanchez, because I was not allowed to grow a mustache until you actually get to the active duty. On my right, or your right, that's me as a corporal. That's around year 4 of my time in. I'm rocking a mustache. My uniform is fitting me a lot better. I'm looking a lot nicer. Next slide. So before we even get to that point, like I was telling you, in boot camp, you have this thing called the crucible. It's essentially the last exercise that you'll ever do before becoming a Marine. This is your evaluation. Do you have what it takes? Did you apply everything that you learned? So in total, it's 3 days, it's 54 hours, 48 miles of hiking, which 13 of it is the last part, where you have to walk back home with all of your gear. You're gonna have 45 pounds of gear the entire time that you're out there. You're sleeping outside under the stars. You're gonna have 36 warrior stations and 29 team building exercises. Those are basically little activities. I say activities, but they're really not like activities you do in school, but like someone pretends to be dead and you'll carry them for like 2 miles. It's very exhausting. And then in total, those 3 days, you have 6 hours of sleep. That's like 2 to 3 hours a night that you're gonna be sleeping. And then you have MREs. MREs are military rations. I'm sure you've seen them in movies. They're like in little black or brown bags. There's about 2,000 calories in those suckers. So you want to portion them out. So they teach you, maybe you should eat like, if your MRE has pizza, crackers, peanut butter, maybe you just want to eat the peanut butter for a snack in the morning. That's your breakfast, your crackers a little bit later. And the pizza, you probably want that at the end of the night when you're like settling down. They'll give you a little fruit pouch, things like that, but they're tiny, but they'll fill you up. But still, 3 days and only 2 of them, you have to really scarce how you're gonna do it. So I wanna really hone in on those 13 miles. So that's day 3. Let's say you go in on Wednesday, right? Wednesday at like 2 a.m., you wake up, you hike about maybe 6 miles to the training station or the training evolution area. That's where you're gonna spend the next 2 days. The whole 2 days, you're doing all these warrior stations, you're carrying around fake dead people, shooting guns, it's almost like a manhunt. You guys ever play manhunt?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
this was like the coolest manhunt I've ever done. They will shoot flares in the sky, that way the instructors are looking for you, so you have to hide. You're hiding from them, you're pretending that you're in a foreign country trying to invade the enemy. So the instructors are with flashlights, they'll pretend to like shoot you, or they'll capture you and they'll like beat you up. And they'll do flares to try to find you a lot easier. So it's like maybe 5 hours of hiding and trying to survive. Because you have your gear with you the whole time. So that's where those military rations come in. So that's already, you're exhausted by the time it's Friday morning and you had maybe 5 to 6 hours of sleep within those 3 nights. You're extremely exhausted. You do not want to get up. The only reason you're getting up is because you know that in about 5 hours, after those 13 miles, all the 3 months that you worked for, it's finally going to pay off. So that's the only motivation you got. Everything else, your body does not want to get up. You have to motivate yourself to get there. So 13 miles, I don't know if that sounds like a lot to you or a little. That's a lot, especially after you're tired. Do you guys remember a few months ago I was walking around like very funny because of my legs? Okay, yeah. That's because I did a very bad leg day. I lifted way too much. That's how my legs felt the morning to start the hike. right? So my body was not in the best shape. I was very exhausted. So then you kind of take breaks. Every 3 miles, you're gonna take a break because there's 13 miles. So 4 breaks and you'll be done. So you do 3. Okay, after I make this little break, I only have 3 more, 6 more, whatever. By mile 6, I could not walk. My legs were jello. As soon as I took my pack off, I fell to the ground and I did not want to get up. That's where I really, at the bottom now, that's where I really found my faith, or that is one, how can I say this? One very monumental point in my faith where you're at your lowest. It's very easy to have faith when you're at the highest of highs, right? When there's really nothing going on, not that there's nothing going on in your life, but nothing very hard. Before that, all I had to do was go to school, go to my little restaurant job, wait tables, and now I was really in the thick of it, where my body and my mind was to the point of exhaustion that I just did not want to go anymore. So I was at a desperation where I just started praying to God, and I said, God, please, I've worked so hard to just finish these 13 miles. I just need a second win, right? So then it's like 5 minutes. I finish my prayer. After the 5 minutes are up, I kid you not, I get up like nothing ever happened. I get up, my legs are like the most powerful that they've ever been. And it gets me a little emotional because like that's the power that God has. This monumental faith that when you press in, when you really are in the thick of it, God will deliver. That is one of the times that faith happens. Now, this type of faith you can find a lot in the Gospels, and we're going to take a look at it specifically in this passage of Mark. Go to the next slide. So here is my proposition to you as we go into this study of Mark. Every Christian should live a life of faithfulness because of these 3 commands, and we're going to go through them. Next slide. Now, a little bit of context. And let me take a little bit of water. 1 second. Pause for dramatic effect. So, right before this passage, 2 miracles happen. The first one is that as the disciples and Jesus are on the sea is a Category 5 hurricane, probably even Category 6 if that even existed. They were wild. Jesus is sleeping on the boat. He doesn't even mind that this is happening, but the disciples are freaking out. Jesus tells the sea, calm down, and it relaxes. The disciples are like, what the heck? That was pretty crazy. Next thing, a little bit after, Jesus encounters the demon-possessed man, Legion. You guys have heard of this story, a man that was possessed by multiple demons. He delivers this guy. So this is the second time in like a span of a few hours that Jesus is performing this miracle. So now we're in Mark, this passage of Mark, where it's almost like a sandwich of miracles going on. You ever seen Inception? It's like a dream within a dream. Okay, this is like Miracleception. There's 2 miracle stories that start to intercept. And it's actually pretty cool when you look at it. All right, next passage. Okay, so Mark 5:21-24. When Jesus had crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. An important thing to notice, well, 2 things. The first is we have this conception that all the religious leaders, all the Jewish elite despise Jesus, and here we see one of the Jewish leaders actually wanting to find faith in Jesus, or at least wanting a miracle from him. The second thing is the phrase, "my little daughter is dying." When you compare this passage to Luke, where it talks about the same event, this is his only daughter. So that kind of drives in more the desperation that I'm talking about. I have a daughter too, and I can't even imagine her like getting hurt. So now imagine this guy's only daughter on her deathbed, minutes away from death. This guy is desperate. That's what I want you to focus in on. Go ahead, next slide. Mark 5:25, a large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. A couple things I want us to know. The first thing, and this will be a bit more clear once we get into the next miracle, but focusing on the 12 years, that's going to have a good significance once we talk about the next miracle. The second thing is this lady has been dealing with this, yes, for 12 years, but she has gone to every medical doctor that she could, and instead of her getting better, she just kept getting worse. I don't know if you ever have had that feeling of, I just want to get better, but it always becomes worse. Maybe it's like a flu where you're like, this kind of sucks, but tomorrow will be better, but the next day it's worse. Okay, this is probably like 100 times worse than that. Having to spend because you don't spend money, all you do is spend money on NyQuil, right? This lady has been spending money on doctors her whole life, but she keeps getting worse. Now, take a look at her faith, though. It's not even if I pray to Jesus, if I talk to Jesus, if I ask him. It's if I just touch, and this is the NIV. In the ESV, it says, if I touch the garment like the thread. You ever knitted or seen how clothes are made? It's literally just pieces of thread. She's saying, even the littlest piece of thread, if I touch that, I know for a fact I'm going to get healed. This is the desperation this lady has. Go ahead, next slide. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? And then these are the disciples talking. Do you see the people crowding against you? His disciples answered. And yet you ask, who touched me? This is kind of funny because I'm just trying to imagine that Jesus is already kind of well known, especially with this religious leader saying, please come with me to go heal my daughter. So there's this crowd already that knows Jesus. So they're already pressing in on him. So the disciples are saying, you're asking who's touching you? Bro, everyone is touching you. That's kind of like a dumb question, Jesus. Like, everyone is touching you, so how are you going to say, who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. One thing I want us to know, Jesus, he really wanted to know who touched her. He's God. He knows who touched her, right? He doesn't have to wonder. But here is the powerful imagery, is that it's the personal relationship that Jesus wants. He wants to know who touched him because he wants that lady to know, I see you and your faith is healed. I think that's a very powerful imagery when you focus in on your own relationship with God, that God wants to see you. He wants to know your faith. Okay, next slide. So here's our first command we see. Have unwavering and undoubtful faith. Everyone's pressing in on the crowd, but this lady, she's pressing in just a bit more, to the point that Jesus realizes his power of healing has left him. This is the type of mentality we should have. It's not just a normal pressing, yes, I have Jesus in my life, but it should be this desperation where there is nothing else in life that matters but Jesus. It's not, yeah, I have Jesus because my parents taught me that I should follow Jesus, or he brings me comfort and also. It's a desperation to know, Jesus, I'm literally nothing without you. I'm a desperate, lost hope, and I need you. That's the type of faith that we need to have. Now, I want to kind of caveat this, though. There is this sick perversion, and it's called the prosperity gospel. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. This is a false gospel that teaches that if you have enough faith, that God is going to bless you, he's going to heal you of every sickness, and it's going to be material, sunshines, and roses. This is a false gospel. Although, yes, every request we should be praying 100%. I believe God can do this in my life, but if it doesn't, I'm okay with that. We saw an example of this with Nabil Qureshi. Remember watching that video? You guys start crying of his deathbed video. I looked into it a bit more. His diagnosis was stomach cancer. Within a span of 6 months, he got the diagnosis and then he died. But what I loved seeing was his tweets, and even on that his deathbed message was, God, I 100% know that you're capable of healing me, and I'm going to believe that. But if this isn't your will, I'm ready to submit to it. This is the faith we need to have where, yes, it's pressing in, desperation. I need this, but if it doesn't happen, I know it's for a greater cause that only you can see. Don't think that every time you have, because this is what happens with this group of people. You didn't get your prayer answered, I guess you don't have enough faith, huh? I guess you don't believe enough. What does that make you feel? It makes you feel less of a Christian. It makes you feel like, and this is why people start deconverting. They're like, I guess I was never a Christian then, my faith isn't strong enough. This is a false gospel that people are eating up because it sounds nice until your prayer doesn't get answered, and then you start to deconvert. Your faith is strong enough, but you have to submit to God's will. Next slide. Okay, Mark 5:35. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said, so why bother to teach her anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told them, don't be afraid, just believe. This is where that inception of miracle after miracle intersecting each other kind of takes into place. If I was Jairus and this was my daughter and I was with Jesus, my reaction will probably be, Jesus, if only you had not stopped for that dumb lady, my daughter would still be alive, right? If we're human and we can reflect, if only you had not stopped, or if he was there, hey Jesus, that's cool, that lady, she needs healing, but like, can we go to my daughter first? Come on, take care of me first. Mine is more important. She's living, my daughter's about to die. Who do you think is more important? We start to put these priorities on Jesus of whose miracle is more important than the other. Now, here's the thing where I want to hone in. Don't be afraid, just believe. Next slide. Here's the second command we see. Have no fear. Do the next slide real quick. There's this, I don't know if you guys know who John Wayne is. He's this like cowboy. He says, courage is being scared to death but saddling up anyways. So I think there's a difference between having a fear and scared. Scared is an instance, right? It can be, I'm kind of scared to like, let's say you're gonna do a big quiz or whatever, like I'm kind of scared, or I'm about to do this public speaking thing, or I'm about to jump off this airplane, I'm a little bit scared. That's a normal feeling. Fear is a constant state. Constantly being anxious, constantly being afraid, constantly just not having hope. This isn't the type of this isn't the type of faith God wants us to have. A faith of fear, yes, fearful of the Lord, but not living in a state of fear of what might happen to us, right? Kind of see this a lot in the military where we're taught have no fear, but we're kind of tricking ourselves. It's okay to be scared. If our whole time training, we knew what we were training to do, and once those bullets started flying, we knew we were gonna be scared, right? We knew if we go in a combat zone, I'm gonna be scared. I'm not going in thinking I'm John Wayne. I'm gonna be scared, but I'm gonna have the courage to go forward. Next slide. All right, Mark 5:37. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. We're gonna talk about that in a second. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. And they laughed at him. A little bit of context. These people who are crying, this is how it worked back then. You would pay, because the religious ceremony would be, when someone dies, you have to cry for them. They would pay professional criers to come and cry at the funeral. So these people aren't even related to this little girl. Someone just paid them to go cry. So they're not even related. So it's not like they're really sad for this girl. That's why they're laughing. If they were actually relatives, I don't think they'd be laughing. They probably think it's like, what the heck? But these people are literally laughing because that's their job. It's just, they're actors. All right, next slide. So after he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. Let me talk about that here in a second. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha kum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. Here we see the number again, 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. Next slide. All right, here's the third command I see. Focus in on Jesus and have godly influences. The one thing we see Jesus, before he even goes to perform this miracle, he takes 3 of his most trusted disciples. And then when he gets there, these fake actors, he says, get out. I don't want you in here. What I can apply from this is 1, yes, focus in on Jesus, but 2, you gotta have godly influences. You can't How are you gonna be in a situation where you have a bunch of naysayers who are always gonna naysay your faith? How are you gonna have people who aren't gonna support you when it's a righteous faith? If you're tripping out and saying weird things, yeah, you need people to rebuke you. But if you're living in the will of God and you have people who are always saying, maybe you shouldn't be doing that, that's kind of weird, your faith is weird, get those people out of your life, okay? Jesus, he literally kicked them out. Why do you need people who are not going to be for you and for your faith? I saw this a lot in the military and even at my own wedding, right? I got married pretty young and I had family members, I had constant service members saying, why are you getting married? Don't you know that's pretty stupid?
Good afternoon, middle school lunches. Middle school lunches are ready.
These were I invited them to the wedding anyways, but these were naysayers who shouldn't have even been part of my life. I had no reason to have to hear their opinion because they knew nothing about my faith. All they saw was this young kid who was in love with a godly woman. They didn't see this. They just saw, you're being dumb. Because that's the worldview they lived in. They had a different worldview. Their worldview was, I want to have as much fun, sleep with as much people as possible, go to all the parties, and you're out here being young and you're not doing with us. Instead you want to get married and read the Bible? You're tripping out, bro. You got to have godly influences in your life. Next one. Okay. Oh, before we even get to application, I want you to notice the 12 years thing I keep bringing up. 12 years, the lady was sick. 12 years was the age of the girl. We see throughout the span of this little girl's life, 12 years, and the duration of this woman's sickness, and this is where you start to see, maybe this is why my prayer hasn't been answered because of the time,
please report
the time value of it. This lady had to wait 12 years, not because her faith wasn't strong enough, but because it was God's timing for this specific event. Does that make sense? 12 years it took for her to get healed for this specific encounter that Jesus was going to have. Sometimes your faith, yes, it's strong, but you have to be willing to submit to God's timing. Okay, application time. This is what I really want to hone in on. I want us to start making bold prayers, not phony baloney declarations, but bold prayers. God, I believe you can do this, and I'm ready to submit to your will. Not, yes, God, I want to have a prosperous life. That's good and all, but is that for God, or is that your flesh just wanting that desire? You need to start looking at God's desires, not your own desires. Next slide. The final thing I want to leave you with, which I won't do, but for your own sake, is have this time of prayer to just restudy this passage with all that I've talked about, and really just start looking at how to apply this to your life. Start having that prayer time with God. Have that special prayer closet that you can go to God and pray for these things. And that's it. Thanks for listening.